Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Doug Gillespie, Clark County Sheriff, Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I have some prepared comments, and then I'm going to introduce two members of my executive staff that will update you on the incident itself, as well as suspect information. And then after the three of us have spoken, we will then answer any questions that you may have. It has now been 24 hours since my two officers and a citizen were murdered. The families of the officers are dealing with the loss of their loved ones, and our police department family is trying to cope with their deaths as well. I can't thank the Las Vegas community enough for the kind words and support over the last 24 hours. I also want to extend a thank you to our brothers and sisters in law enforcement, for I've received personal calls, text messages, and emails from law enforcement brothers and sisters across this great country. To my agency, I'm proud of your focus over the past 24 hours. From the initial response to our patrol officers' call for help at CC's Pizza, as well as your response to the Walmart, was extraordinary. You showed no fear, entering a building knowing shots were being fired and that two of your brothers had already been shot. You used your training and good sense and developed a plan that forced the two suspects into a situation where their only avenue was to take their own lives. You did not get caught up in the moment. You relied on good leadership and sound police tactics. I applaud you. Once the situation was contained and the suspects no longer a threat, our investigative personnel began their work. Two dynamic and large scenes were processed and examined with great skill and efficiency. I also want to thank other first responders to the scene: Las Vegas Fire and Rescue, Clark County Fire, AMR, Nevada Highway Patrol. To those paramedics, even though both of my officers did not make it, I know you worked hard to give them a chance. To UMC and the Trauma Center, God bless you. I watched you work so hard on my two men, but we all know the wounds were too severe. To the family of Mr. Joseph Wilcox, the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department would like to send our deepest heartfelt condolences. Joseph died attempting to protect others. His death is completely senseless. I know all of you here, as well as many people far away, have many questions. I would now ask Assistant Sheriff Kevin Mayhill to come to the podium. He will speak to the investigation, the identity of the suspects, and what we have in regards to the event itself. Once he is finished, Assistant Sheriff Joe Lombardo will address where we go from here and about how our patrol officers will operate moving forward. As I stated before, once they have both completed their remarks, we will answer questions. Kevin?
Thank you, Sheriff. I'm just going to give you the names real quick, so as I begin to tell you the story, it'll be very simple for you to follow along here. I think most of you already know that the two officers involved, the first one is Officer Igor Saldo. He's 31 years of age, and he was hired with Metro in 2006. The second officer is Alan Beck. He's 41 years of age. He was hired here in Metro in 2001. The two suspects you'll see on to my left here, the first one is Jared Miller. He's 31 years of age. The second is his wife, Amanda Miller. She is 22 years of age. The citizen victim in this case, Mr. Joseph Wilcox, is 31 years of age. So chronology of the events as we move forward, at about 11:22 hours yesterday, Officers Saldo and Beck were inside of the CC's Pizza taking their lunch break. At that time, Mr. Jared Miller entered into the restaurant, looked around briefly, and immediately exited the restaurant. He then went back out and met with his wife, Amanda, and both of them re-entered the store after leaving several of the items that they had carried with them, being backpacks, outside of the store. They walked past our officers who were eating lunch in one of the booths, and immediately upon passing them, Jared Miller pulled a handgun out and shot Officer Saldo one time in the back of his head. Officer Saldo immediately succumbed to his injuries, and there was no further movement from him in the booth. At that time, Officer Beck immediately began to react when he was confronted with lethal gunfire from Jared Miller, and he was shot once in the throat area. What happened after that, very quickly, was that Amanda Miller then removes a handgun from her purse, and both Jared and Amanda Miller fire multiple shots into Officer Beck. This entire incident at the CC's is captured on videotape. We're still conducting forensic review of that video. Immediately upon the shooting finishing, the suspects pulled the officers out of the booth and onto the ground, where they placed a Gadsden flag, which is a "Don't Tread on Me" yellow flag, on the body of Officer Beck. They also threw a swastika on top of his body. At that point, Mr. Jared Miller then pinned a note to Officer Saldo that basically stated that this is the beginning of the revolution. They made the same types of comments inside of the restaurant, where numerous restaurant patrons heard that commentary. They then walked out of the restaurant, gathered their backpacks, and proceeded in a southbound direction. They then crossed Nellis Boulevard over to the Walmart and entered into the front door of the Walmart store. Immediately upon entering the store, Jared Miller walked in through the front doors and fired off one round and told the people to get out, and that this is a revolution and that the police were on the way. Amanda Miller was trailing behind Jared Miller, and we believe she was placing the backpacks into a shopping cart. At that time, our citizen victim, Mr. Joseph Wilcox, was located over in the area where you pay, and he observed this activity, and he told his friend he was going to confront the suspects. He was carrying a concealed weapon, and he immediately and heroically moved towards the position of Jared Miller. Upon completing that action, he did not realize that Amanda Miller was with Jared Miller and passed her directly. As soon as he began to confront Jared Miller with his firearm, Amanda Miller removed her firearm and shot him one time in the ribs area, and where he immediately collapsed. Subsequent to that, the 911 calls continued to come in, and the officers were responding to both locations. Information was put out at the scene very quickly that when Jared and Amanda Miller were at the CC's, they took the firearms from our downed officers, as well as all of the ammunition on their belts when they left, and took that with them. As soon as they got into they continued towards the rear of the Walmart store, and our officers, led by two sergeants using the active shooter assailant protocols that we train on, called MACTAC, decided to enter into five-man elements and enter in the store. One team entered from the rear, the other team entered from the front, and almost upon entry, the team in the rear began contact with the suspects. There was an exchange of gunfire between the officers and the suspects, and the suspects continued towards the rear of the store near the automotive area. There was a number of times that the officers and the suspects both conversed as well as exchanged gunfire, and we had an officer immediately at the direction of one of the sergeants get into the surveillance area with one of the security officers from Walmart, and then begin to view that tape and provide updated intelligence to our responding officers as to the locations of the suspects. At that point, the sergeant at the scene made the determination that they had the suspects contained in the rear of the store, and they were not going to further advance on the officers, and they were waiting for SWAT to arrive. At some point during this struggle, Jared Miller had gathered items from throughout the store, and both of the suspects had laid down and sat down on the grounds at various times and positioned themselves in a tactically advantageous position to engage any officers that were approaching. He also took some of the items around there and sort of built a defensive position around Amanda. She was seated and was suffering from an apparent gunshot wound. At one point, he laid on his stomach in front of Amanda. Amanda removed took her handgun and fired several rounds into Jared, where he then immediately passed on the floor. At that point, Amanda took her handgun and ended her own life with one gunshot wound to the head. SWAT officers responding went in, immediately secured both suspects with handcuffs. At that point, it was made a determination that Amanda was still breathing, and we took her out and transported her to the University Medical Center with the assistance of our fire professionals. That's a very brief description of what we know at this point. I would like to point out to you a couple of what we have found from the investigation as it's unfolded at this point. At this time, we believe this is an isolated act. As you all know, we're conducting hundreds of interviews. It's a very complex investigation. We're looking at social media. We're talking to associates. We're talking to neighbors. We're trying to make a determination what it is that could have been the motive, what was the motivation behind their targeting police officers and walking in with no warning and executing our officers. I can tell you that there's no doubt that the suspects have some apparent ideology that's along the lines of militia and white supremacists. You already have reporting in the media that on the Facebook of Mr. Jared Miller, he indicated that he was at the Bundy Ranch during the cattle standoff. We continue to utilize investigative resources to determine if in fact that is true. As you all know, there was a convergence of not only militia but white supremacists and sovereign citizens to the Bundy Ranch. We continue to look at any connectivity that Jared or Amanda Miller may have to that previous action. I'll tell you that there's also a lot of media speculation in regards to those connections with that ideology, and one of the things that we believe at this point with the swastika is that we don't necessarily believe that they are white supremacists or associated with the Nazi movement. We believe that they equate government and law enforcement fascism and those who support it with Nazis. In other words, they believe that law enforcement is the oppressor and they're associated with the Nazi movement. As you well know, we're working with our federal counterparts, and as the suspects have previous residence in both Washington and Indiana. We believe they've only been here since January of this year. Jared Miller has a criminal background where he is a convicted felon for vehicle theft offenses in the state of Washington. And as you well know, he said in his Facebook post that is one of the reasons that he was kicked out of the Bundy Ranch, because of his criminal history and background. We do realize that the events in Gold Butte attracted a significant number of anti-government, anti-law enforcement individuals, and we continue to investigate the aspects of this case that may be related to that. At this time, I'm going to have Assistant Sheriff Lombardo come up and provide you some commentary as to the current posture of our organization, and then we'll be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So like Kevin mentioned, I'm Assistant Sheriff Joe Lombardo. I'm in charge of the Law Enforcement Services Group. I'm going to inform you what our current posture is on the police department and where we're going in the future. Kevin gave you a lot of information reference the event as it took place and how we responded to the event. I'm going to give you information on how we're going to respond forward. The sheriff mentioned yesterday that our primary concern is the safety of our officers and the safety of our community. Okay? What that means is we're not able to shut down when we have a tragic event such as took place yesterday. We have to continue to provide safety for the community. It's a 24/7 job, and we don't have the ability to slow down or not respond to calls. So how are we going to respond to that? We have gone to an emergency mobilization of our uniformed services. What that means is we go to an AB roster, 12 on, 12 off. On any given day in the Las Vegas Valley, we have approximately 150 police officers in uniforms responding to calls for service. When we go to an AB roster, that means we have approximately 300 to 350 police officers. That is the posture we are in now, okay? That will continue indefinitely. We are now operating on a 48-hour window. We have not made a decision when we will stop that mobilization. As we run the intel down to the ground and we are comfortable, there's no other additional threats that are going to occur, we will never be 100% comfortable, but once we feel comfortable enough that we can scale back, we will make adjustments accordingly. What I ask now, additionally, we're going to have our plainclothes officers who are normally in plainclothes. They respond to detective-type functions, investigative-type functions. They will also be placed in uniforms until indefinite time, okay? And the reason why we're doing that is twofold. One is solidarity for the rest of the police department, and two is the ability to quickly respond by a uniformed police officer if we do receive intelligence that needs to be responded to. Okay, but I ask at this point is that you, with the press, act professionally, do not put out information that hasn't been substantiated, and give us the ability to respond to that first and to figure out whether it is accurate or not. We do not want to create an environment in our community where there's fear and panic. We are doing our job, and let us do our job. With that said, we'll answer any questions at this point. And please just identify us individually, and we'll respond to your questions.
Dan McMahill, Mike Tidy, NBC News.
Go ahead.
So you said this is at this point an isolated issue. You don't think that it's attached to or linked to a broader conspiracy or a broader group that these two individuals acted individually?
We do believe that they acted individually. We certainly believe that they're connected to a certain ideology, which is anti-police and anti-government. But as of right now, we have not been able to find any additional links or any additional suspects.
Dan Simon here with CNN. Do you believe that these two officers were essentially targeted at random, or were they specifically sought out by the suspects?
Yeah, I know there was some conflicting information on that earlier, but as we sit here today, we believe that it was a random act. You know, they had an apartment, as you well know, and I apologize, I left that part out. We did conduct some search warrants on their residence. Subsequent to that, we found a lot of paperwork associated with that, but they had been kicked out of one apartment and living with a neighbor. We believe that they left their apartment about 4:30 in the morning and walked over to the location where they confronted the officer. So we don't know if there was additional information that they'd scouted the location previously, but as it stands right now, we believe it's a random act.
Sir, John Gutter with ABC News. If I could ask you to kind of clarify for us the actual shooting sequence or events that occurred. It sounded like your officer may have wounded Jared Miller, and that then Amanda may have been wounded at the Walmart by other officers, or did the civilian engage with any gunfire? Could you just...
Yeah, I can. Well, it's difficult. We're conducting the autopsies as we speak, and I don't want to tell you that you know, a certain round came from a certain individual until I have any clarity about it. I can tell you that a couple of our officers were armed with rifles on those entry teams. I can tell you that it appears that the suspects both have some gunshot wounds. As to where they exactly came from, I'm not 100% certain. I think that pretty much answers your question. I just don't have the information to give to you at this point. I can tell you that it is confirmed that our citizen victim did not get off any shots at the suspects.
Assistant Sheriff McMahon Spencer with Channel 13. There was a search done last night in downtown, and the neighbors were saying that that was the apartment in which the Millers were living. Can you confirm whether or not that was the apartment, and if it was there anything found inside?
Yeah, we believe that they may have actually been staying at the neighbors next door due to the unsanitary conditions of the apartment that they were actually renting. So still part of the investigation, but that is the location that we served the warrant at last night. The other point I make to you, and you know, obviously this thing took a very long time. You know, when a Walmart empties out very quickly, there's a lot of items that are left behind. When we went in there, not only the backpacks that were left by the suspects, but items that were left by victims that were fleeing very rapidly. And so it took us a very long time to get through that process of making sure that we didn't have any bombs or we didn't have any other threats to responding officers. So it was a lengthy investigation. I can tell you that in the backpacks, one of the things recovered from one of the backpacks was hundreds of rounds of ammunition. So it appeared as if they were prepared for a lengthy gun battle at some point or another.
What about the explosion in the...
I'm sorry. Who are you, sir?
Ian Lovett, New York Times.
Okay.
What about the explosion in the apartment building? Was that booby-trapped?
Negative. It was not booby-trapped. It was just a technique that we used with our SWAT team.
Johnny Schwartz with NBC Los Angeles. We've heard reports that there may have been a manifesto of sorts found on possibly the suspects or maybe pinned to one of the officers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was not a manifesto. It was a note, and it did specify almost verbatim what they said verbally, which was the revolution is beginning, something along those lines. Aaron?
Aaron Drollhorn, KLAS. What's your message to the public who may have some acquaintances that have expressed anti-law enforcement views, because these people apparently had sounded off to neighbors before about being anti-police? If anyone is concerned, should they call Metro just to be safe?
Yeah, listen, there's some unconfirmed reporting that possibly the suspects told a neighbor that they were going to go out and kill 4 police officers before they left. You know, we have the See Something, Say Something campaign. You know, that clearly fits within. If it just doesn't look right, notify the police. You know, we need to hear about those times when individuals or groups of individuals are talking about going out and committing acts of violence, whether it's against the police or anybody else in our community. So 311, 911, we need to hear from our citizens. They're the best eyes and ears that we have out there.
Could you quickly give us a rundown of the type of weaponry they had?
Yeah, there's numerous handguns and there was a shotgun. And I apologize, there's just so much here. I will mention one thing to you that I think is critically important. Our cops responded to this event, and you know, they really faced danger down. And tactically, they performed just unbelievably well. One of the things that they did, because the Walmart is so large, they don't know what is going on. They knew the direction they were headed, and there was a fire exit in the back. They'd taken a patrol car and parked it up again. Once they learned that the suspects were hunkered down, they parked it up against that rear fire exit. At one point during this gun battle, Jared Miller had taken the shotgun that he had and tried to shoot that door out to get it so they could escape out the back of the Walmart. But due to the quick thinking of the patrol officers on the scene and really the tactical superiority that they displayed there, we prevented them from further endangering any other lives. And the reality is that it was a packed Walmart, and the actions of those officers saved a lot of lives that day. I'm sorry, ma'am.
Denise Toussaint, KSNB, Channel 3. I know your officers are very well trained, very well prepared, but is there a sense of maybe some fear now that there are these people out there that are targeting law enforcement, you know, as simple as eating lunch?
Is that weighing? Sure. There's no doubt about it. But we talk to our employees the day that they hire on. You're very recognizable in this uniform. That's why we wear vests. And we have the tools on our belt that we do. That's one of the reasons why we're doubling up and we're mobilizing our patrol force. I want my officers to feel as comfortable as they possibly can under the circumstances. So we're doing our best to create that environment. We'll be having a lot of discussions internally as to how we move forward. Staffing levels, calls for service, things of that nature. But it would be naive on my part, on my organization's part, to think that that is not weighing heavy on their minds as they're out doing a very dangerous job.
Sheriff Gillespie, Lauren Rosella, KLAS. You were just speaking with some of the victims' families just now, just before this press conference. Can you tell us kind of what your interactions were with the families of your officers and kind of what might be the next step with helping them?
Well, they're receiving as much emotional support as we can provide for them. I think you can all imagine if this happened to one of your loved ones, what just that impact might be. They're trying to process what it is that has taken place, and I think that's why it's so important that in situations like this that we're very careful with the information that we put out, that it's as accurate as possible, as well as that which you report. But I can tell you that they're working, they have good support, but it's going to be a difficult road. 2 young families, and their fathers are no longer there.
As I understand things, Jared Miller fired both fatal shots at the officers. So when that was going on, was Amanda like she was at the Walmart looking for other citizens?
Right now, our investigation shows they both fired shots inside of CC's Pizza.
But he fired the fatal rounds at the officers, is that correct?
Well, he fired the shots at one officer. He also fired shots at the second officer, but so did she.
Sheriff, if I could please, this has really struck a nerve, not just in our community, but all across the country. There are a lot of people who ask simply, what can they do to help the families, to help other officers, etc. What you've talked to these families, you've unfortunately had experience in this before. What can they do?
In regards to the families, you know, the emails to the department that can be forwarded to the families. If it's financial support they wish to show, the Injured Police Officers Fund is the way to do that. What they can do for the officers themselves as our community, when you see them out there doing their job, take a moment out of your day, like a couple of citizens did with myself this morning when I was getting gas. They obviously went out of their way to come up and offer to me their heartfelt condolences. I know people always think, how do you come up with the right words? You never do. Just your presence and the fact that you've offered them goes a long way. As we move forward on this, we'll continue to hold updates. If you get some information that you would like to have confirmed, please do that through our Public Information Office. I know some of you have access to me via my cell phone. I would really ask you, under the circumstances, because of the volume of things that are coming through me personally, that you use that avenue today. I appreciate you all being here. Look forward to continue to work with you as we move through this tragedy. Thank you.